Welcome, everyone. My name is Tim Brown, the Hillyer Director, and I want to welcome you to this evening's program, which is a salon talk with Renée Stout. Renée Stout will be joined by Mel Hardy, who is the co-founder of the Millennium Arts Salon, who is our partner for this program. And if this is your first time here, you should know that this program is being organized in conjunction with this exhibition in this room. Raise your hand if you've been here before to see the show. So this is your first time seeing the show. So this show is Democracy in the Crossfire, Art, Identity, and Resilience. And we have been having quite a few programs in order to generate discussion about democracy in art, and that's why we're having this program here. I'm very excited to have Renée Stout, whose work is featured in this exhibition. It's called The American Way. And you can't miss it because the word judgment is right in the center of it. Anyway, join me in giving a well-round of applause to Renée Stout and Mel Hardy.
So if you'll allow me to open with, I'm going to have Renée to self-introduce, but I just want to talk about this hat for a second. The hat says, art is activism. And what we know is that the world needs a different approach to understanding its place in actively engaging for human flourishing and human betterment through any of our life's endeavors. So I wear this hat that I've gotten at the bookstore at Smithsonian American, and so there's plenty of them there. So it's disrespectful to wear a hat for this kind of event, but I just wanted to lift that. So we're gathered here today with Renée Stout, an artist of great renown here in our city. I'm going to ask her to introduce herself. I know that she will be a bit on the self-deprecative side, so I will tease out some stuff that she may not mention. So Renée, who are you?
Well, I'm an artist that's originally from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I moved here in 1985. I went to Carnegie Mellon. I was trained as a painter. But when I got here, I started moving more into sculpture because of some seeds that were planted at the Carnegie Museum of Art, but then flourished when I got here and saw the wonderful National Museum of African Art, which had a great role in me discovering some aspects of myself as an African American woman. And so I started doing art that was very influenced by African art to sort of try to figure out what that heritage was and the spirituality behind it and the philosophy behind it. But then living in a city like Washington, D.C., which is the most political city on the earth, I started connecting dots between the way we live in the world and the way we relate to each other and the politics of the city. And so there was no turning back then. So now my work, even though it has a spiritual, an overall spiritual thing that I put forward, there's always this underlining thing that addresses political issues, social issues. It could be very subversive, but at the same time, I want to make objects that are engaging so that when people come to see my work, they like the work, but if they dig deeper, it's saying a whole lot of stuff. So that's who I am.
It's good. So as an artist, we know that you've had a pretty storied experience as an artist here, widely collected, widely shown. I want to go back to some recitation in 2010 at Hemphill. You did the House of Chance and Mischief. Followed up in 2015 also at Hemphill. You looked at something called Wild World. And then at the Katzen in 2016, you had this Tales of the Conjure Woman. We're going to come back to that in just a second. Also at Hemphill, a kind of like review of Renée Stout. Also Mark Strauss in 2021 and 23. They're looking at you almost retrospectively. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that I was particularly intrigued about is the 7 windows in Madame Ching. Who is Madame Ching?
Okay, so Madame Ching, I say this every time I give a talk because most people don't know this. Some people do who know me well. I'm an extreme introvert. So it's always hard for me to do something like this. But I'm okay with it because I know why I do the work that I do. So it's easy for me to explain it for the hour that I have to do it. Then when I leave here, I don't want to see anybody for a year. So, but Madam Ching was an alter ego that I created when I was in my 30s. And it was because I was introverted and you know, sort of shy. So what I did was created this alter ego that I could project. But then I'm also a storyteller, and I like writing as well. So she became this sort of vehicle, like the protagonist in this ongoing tale that I've been telling in all my bodies of work. It's like I'm telling this long-running story, and every show is a chapter. And so she became the protagonist. But you know, Madam Ching came at a point in time when I was like probably in my 30s. And what I thought was, okay, you know, I'm going to be able to say what I feel and be who I really am when I'm 60, right? So I'm 30, mind you, right? So I projected this woman who was an older woman, and, you know, she, you know, was confident, and she was this and she was that. But I didn't realize when you hit 40, all of a sudden, that's when you become like, wait a minute, I can say what I want to say. I'm who I am. And you start to really, you know, grow into yourself at that time. And so I had to change the alter ego. So what I did, she was named, I called her Fatima Mayfield. And she was closer to my age. She was my age. So then I was really hell on wheels with her, right? I could really act out with her, but I was still kind of hiding. So I would do the work, and it was based on her adventures. But then at some point I realized I wasn't using her anymore in the work, and I'm like, what happened? People were saying, well, what happened to her? I didn't realize that I had given myself permission to be who I actually was. The alter ego was me. It was the me that was inside, the me that I was afraid to just be. And when I turned 40, I started becoming that. So even though I make reference to her sometimes just as a character in a story, I am who she is. That is me, you know, and I make no apologies whatsoever. So that's who these women are. They're aspects of me.
Fantastic. Well, you are participating in this exhibition called The Crisis of Democracy and the American Way. I think this is really fantastic. So, when I think of the American way, I think of the comic book character Superman, truth, justice, and the American way. And so that matter of the American way is really embedded in so much of American culture. And so how do we intersect, how do you intersect this matter of democracy, the crisis of democracy, and the American way?
Well, you mentioned a show where I think the turning point came when I realized that we were headed in a really bad direction. And I'm one of these thinkers I'm a critical thinker and I'm an abstract thinker. And all I do is just take in information and process it and start connecting dots because I see things in patterns. So it allows me to see things that are coming in a certain kind of way because it's like the logical outcome of some things that are going on. I look at those things and say, well, these things are happening, then that means this is going to happen. So I will tell my friends what I've been thinking, and yeah, whatever. You know, nobody ever believes me, right? So in 2015, when I did Wild World, I was speaking to now because I saw it coming. Okay. So Wild World was done in 2015. Before Donald Trump even decided to run. But I just started feeling something in the air. You know, those dots were coming to me. And I'm like, we're at a crossroads, and it's a serious one. And I'm telling people this, like, you know, it's hyperbole, you know. I'm like, no, you know. And then here we are. So Wild World, that show at Hemp Hill, all of the things in that show, I was addressing where I saw us going. You know, and really focusing on the crossroads as a place where theoretically you have to make a decision, you have to make a choice. And I kept saying to myself, we're going to make the wrong choice. We're going to make the wrong choice. And we did. You know, even if we didn't vote for him, people made the wrong choice for us, you know, and put us on this path. So that's where it started. And ever since then, even though, you know, my work goes off on various tangents, because I love beauty, some things are about beauty and love, but there's always going to be this underlying thing that I feel like I have the responsibility as an artist living through these times to document some of the things that are happening. You know, because I look at people like artists like in history like Goya, who documented his times and the political things that were going on. And I think that, you know, I don't feel like every artist should have to do that, but there are some of us that feel compelled to do it, and I'm one of those artists.
Good for you. Well, we greatly respect your articulation of both yourself and how you look at the world. Sandy and I earlier were talking about black swan theory and how your wild world thing, while you can't, you were engaged in anticipating stuff, looking forward, and futurism is a very important element of how creative class thinkers, doers, builder, makers engage in how we imagine the world that we want to see. Talk to us about this work that you have presented, because the matter of judgment, according to philosopher Hannah Arendt, in the kind of underpinning of what the democratic matter is, judgment is so important there. What is your presentation here?
Okay, well, let's just start with the fact that this piece was actually part of a larger tableau that I had done in the Conjure Woman show that was at American University. And in that Conjure Woman show, it was about the alter ego, Fatima Mayfield, who's a root worker and a fortune teller and all that kind of stuff. And so there was so many different kinds of things in that show. But one of the things was a tableau that I created that wasn't from Fatima's point of view, but from the point of view of a reverend in her community who would be very Christian, a black Christian, who would frown upon any kind of African belief systems. Because in slavery times, Africans were told that their beliefs were devil worship. And so over time, you know, they pretty much let, on the surface most of the time, but sometimes there were people who retained some of that. But for the most part, African Americans became Christian in this country and didn't want anything to do with any of their traditional African spiritual belief systems. So as a foil to Fatima Mayfield, I had this tableau that was from Reverend Beach's point of view. So I had made this altar, and you know, he had a pedestal, there was a Bible open on it, and there was like this, the altar was constructed with that in the middle. It had judgment in the middle. And one of the reasons why I use that particular word is because when I look at Christians all through the time I was growing up, and especially now, they love to pick, and these are just my opinions, and I'm not putting anybody's religion down. I respect anybody who worships a particular religion. It's just not the way I see it, you know. So I'm just giving my opinion. But it's cherry picking, and it seems that Christians within this country, because I can only speak to this, because this is what I know. I've traveled, but not really talked to people in religions in other places, in their you know, home countries. So my reference point is Christianity from an American standpoint. Cherry picking the Bible and loving anything that has to do with punishment and judgment, you know. So all this love and tolerance and all this kind of stuff, I don't see it. This is what I see, you know, the judgment. And that's the way it was functioning within the show as well. Reverend Beach was being judgmental to Fatima, the character. So when, you know, installations come back sometimes, they're made up of pieces that can function on their own as pieces, but then sometimes the rest of the things are just props that create the tableau, and they're not really pieces, so I get rid of them. But the altar part, I guess I could have used it as a piece, but I didn't want to, so I took that part out and I kept that. because it was the essence of that piece.
Okay.
And it still functions the way it did in that piece. So I had it reframed. And so now it stands on its own as a piece, and it's kind of conceptual in a way. It's minimal for me, for anybody who knows my work. It's kind of minimal, but I do that sometimes because I just want people to think about it. And I'm very big on titles, because if I tell you the title's giving you a clue as to what the piece is talking about. So if I say The American Way, and then you're looking at a piece that says judgment, then you connect those two things.
Fantastic. And so the matter of judgment as a part of distilling how we imagine our participation in a political economy or a political construct in this thing we call this democratic republic of America. How are you linking this to demos, the people, and this thing of joining in the community?
Well, I think I know what you're saying. One of the reasons why I wanted that in the context of this show, because this show touches on a whole lot of things that are going on here and all over the world. I mean, we're not in some isolated thing. Everything's connected. Everything that's happening in the world is connecting to what's here, and what's happening in the world, everything, So what I'm thinking when I look at this thing that says judgment, we're at a time when there is a particular group of religious people who have decided that they are the real Americans, and the rest of us who don't conform to the way they think, they have to legislate us into bending to their will. And so here I am as an African-American woman saying, wait a minute, it took me a while to kind of discover, the belief systems of my ancestors and to get comfortable with that and how it's transformed me into a person. My outlook on the world is not from a Christian standpoint, even though I went to church when I was little with both grandmothers. One was Catholic, one was Baptist. But we went to, but my parents let us go to church with both of them. And what's important in this, and the reason why I can make this critique of what I'm seeing, my parents never forced us into religion. Like I said, my mother was raised Catholic, my father was raised Baptist. Neither one of them went to church when we were growing up. But they would let us go every Sunday, which with whatever grandmother we wanted to go with, me and my sister. But in our house, there was spirituality. I could remember my mother might say, well, God wouldn't want you to do that, or, God, blah, blah, blah. But this wasn't this thing that was always, she wasn't always saying that. But it was clear that she and my father believed in God. But there was no religion that defined that God. So in some ways, I was given the freedom early on to not be indoctrinated in anything. So when I got older and I realized I hadn't been, because I looked at classmates who had been, so I said to my father one day, why is it that you never forced us to go to church? He said, because we thought that religion was something that you needed to make your own mind up, about when you got old enough. And I'm like, who says that, right? And so I was free to explore and not feel any guilt about, like a lot of times what religions do, if you step outside of religion and start to question and research anything else that's outside of that religion, there's there's judgment, right? So it's all coming back to judgment, to try to control you. You do anything that religion doesn't approve of, there's going to be some judgment. I didn't have that judgment growing up. So it allowed me to research these African belief systems that everybody said was devil worship.
Yeah. As people review this exhibition, I think that exhibitions that are curated have their own kind of narrative. They have their own kind of purpose. Our host, Tim Brown, has curated, along with another, this exhibition that we get a chance to explore, and you are here as a member of this group exhibition to kind of explore the nature and notion of a global community in this quest for understanding democracy and why it is in crisis. Can you speak to that a bit?
You know, and this is very simplistic, but I think about this sometimes because I got a lot of time in my own head at home because, I live by myself. I do my art all the time. I don't have a lot of distractions during the day, so I'm constantly thinking. And I keep coming back to, that saying, money is the root of all evil, and organized religion, in my opinion, is another root of all evil. And between those two things, if you think about it, with what's going on in the world, everything keeps stemming back to those two things. You know what I mean? Like, if there may be like convoluted offshoots, but when you distill it all back down and trace it back down, it all comes back to those two things.
Well, I'm going to ask the audience to kind of like unpack that, what you've given to us, but I'm going to push back on the notion that you're an introvert.
You sound like my father. My father says to me, "You're not an introvert." I said, "You don't even know what it is."
That's one thing, but also that your messaging through your art is also counterbalanced by what we see of you on Facebook. You are, has anybody been subject to her, admonitions to us about where we are in the world? Okay, yeah. We're going to have the audience comment about that because we're all subject to it. So I think it's really a remarkable thing. We've known Renée for a while, and she has been on the quiet, studious, get the work done side. But these Facebook things, man. So, we honor that too, my dear.
Thank you.
Yeah, we honor that too. So this matter of what we are seeing as you walk through this exhibition here, beyond your work, you're the focus here. What else has struck you around what you've seen in this gallery?
You know how I was telling you I connect dots? This is what this represents. I walk in this gallery, and to me, this is a tangible representation of the way I see the world. I don't see the world as sitting in my home in Washington, D.C., and this is what's going on. I feel like I'm a citizen of the world. Even though I'm right here, I'm in the world, and I'm connected to everybody in the world. So if somebody's suffering around the world, I'm feeling that too. You know what I mean? And it's not something that I can act like it doesn't exist. So when I walk in this room and I see all of this, I'm already connecting that this is a world that Tim has sort of, it's a slice of the way I see, and that's the way I took it when I walked in.
Fantastic. Yeah. Well, I do respect you as a global citizen. If I look at the body of work, where you are collected around the world, that global citizenry is ever more important today. We need that for this world that is to come. And so we honor you as one of those creatives in our world that can help us augur that. We would want very much for those of you who have intersected with Renée before, what questions might you have?
If we're talking about democracy in America, that is a specifically Western product of the Enlightenment, more or less. And it seems to me it's a very good model for improving relations between different peoples. In your own visit with the culture of your ancestors and looking at Africa, and with your mention of globalized relations, what does it look like for the rest of the world when our way of mm, liberty, equality, fraternity, I'm using the French, is specifically Western, what might it look like in Africa?
I don't.
Variant of democracy.
I don't know because I have never lived or experienced an African culture. So I don't know. I can't answer that question. I don't know how other people would interpret what democracy should look like to them. All I can do is in the culture that I'm in and a part of, and that has shaped me, and that I also try to shape, is to make it so that we are better people here. And if we're better people here, hopefully that's what translates to the world and gives people a real model, because we haven't been a real model, and it's like, people say all kinds of things. Oh, this is the greatest country on the earth. This is, but I like to tell my father sometimes, who can get lost in saying, oh, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this, and he's been saying the same thing for years, right? And I'm going to do this, and I say, saying is not doing. We say a lot of things about this, but we're not doing it. So, I can't buy into that. It's like you're saying one thing and you're doing another, you're demonstrating another, and you're demonstrating that to the world. So you're fooling yourself in saying these things, but other people see what's really happening. So how do we reconcile that? Before we know how we're influencing or what democracy is like in other places, until we get it right. So that's where I'm at with it. If that makes sense, if that answer makes sense.
Hey, Renee. My name is Janet Shaw. How everyone? How are you doing? I'm going to get into my teacher mode. Renee, just point blank, how do we get young people, in your estimation, to really see art as a vehicle for expounding on, highlighting what's happening in the world? Because I think when you get the young, you really have something to build upon. And then also, quite frankly, why do you think people should care? Because often art is seen as beautification and individual enjoyment in many ways. So how do we get them to get involved and think about that, and take it out of the realm of not quite elitism, entertainment, but something that is a viable component to our society and everyday life?
You know what? The problem with that lies within our culture. Art is not treated as important here. You go to other countries and art is part of the culture. It is respected. Artists are respected. They have a role. Not here. And so if art is the thing, art and music and things like that are the first thing that are taken out of the curriculum when they want to save money, that's the problem. So if it's not being taught that as something they can connect to reflect, the culture and learn from it, if it's not being taught, they're not going to connect to it. And I don't know how you put a Band-Aid on that and say, well, maybe if we just do this. If it doesn't start from the very beginning, you can't make it happen. And see, what the thing is, I was immersed in art when I was growing up because, fortunately, my parents, first of all, respected art. My father wanted to be an artist, but he knew that he wasn't going to be able to make it as a black artist. He just felt like he wasn't going to be able to make it. And then he wanted to be a lawyer. My grandfather told him, son, nobody's going to want the services of a black lawyer. You're not going to make it. But the ironic thing is, I turned out to be an artist, and my sister's a judge. So the two things that he wanted to be, we became.
That's okay.
And I don't know if that was a subconscious thing.
It's okay.
You know what I mean? So they took us to the museum. My parents took us to the museum. They took us to art fairs. We had Three Rivers Arts Festival. They took us to that. My mother's brother was a self-taught artist. She watched him so immersed in his drawing when he grew up, that when she saw me doing it, she understood the impulse to create and fed it with art supplies. So I had a foundation in art. It should start in the home as well. If the home is not teaching it, home and school. And so then, the other thing is when I was in high school, which was like 73 to 70, I graduated in 76, just after the Civil Rights Movement, there was an opening up of the culture where the civil rights had taught people that you have to, the powers that be understood, we have to do more. But that was a window that closed up during Reagan. It started to close up then, and it's where we are now. The society was not as open as it was when I was in high school. Mm-hmm. So I had a textbook that I love, and I posted it on Facebook. And, and I talked about how I love this textbook so much because in the textbook, they put art in there to understand, make students understand how art connected to the societies they lived in. That was in a textbook I had. I love the textbook so much that, years later, I'm like, boy, I wish I had that textbook. And so I'm at my sister's house. She lived in California. So I went to visit my sister one day. So I'm sitting in her bedroom. She had these bookshelves. And I happened to look up, and the textbook was called The People Make a Nation. And I'm like, where did you get that? Because it was high up. She's like, oh, I love that textbook. I had to take it. So when I got home from her house, it took me a couple years, but I searched for it, found it on eBay, and ordered it. And so I have that textbook. And so I posted it on Facebook, and I also, I showed people the cover, some pages, and talked about the impact of that textbook on me. So I know that it has to be in schools there where it's done, and in the home. It can't just magically just happen, you know what I mean? It's just not gonna happen that way. Mm-hmm.
So might I sort of compliment what you've just indicated? Mm-hmm. Again, I'm wearing this hat that says artist activism. And so the matter of, I teach my students, if you are created, you are creative. Mm-hmm. And the task of this movement toward art and entertainment, the focus is on entertainment and not the art.
Yeah.
And so the creative impulse that we are born with, we are endowed with. Humans are endowed as creatives.
Yeah.
But the state and markets seek to keep us entertained, mm-hmm. to prevent us from doing your creative and critical thinking. So I do, want to complement your thinking around, my own analysis around the state markets and civil society, those bedrocks of political economy analysis. And so I really appreciate how you lift that in yourself and also model that for other artists. Jan's question was about how we get young people engaged in a way that we can follow leaders like you are an artist also, Jan, mm-hmm. and Renee as well.
Oh, hi. My name is Sylvie Bello, and I'm with the Cameroon American Council. Thank you, Mel, for for hosting the panel. And hi, Renee. My question is about reparative justice. When we look at reconciliation and when we look at atrocities, and we've always seen it within every movement, you mentioned the civil rights, within every movement, artists have always played a role. When it comes to reparative justice, especially for African Americans here in the US, what is the role that artists play within reparative justice? Some reparative justice that comes to mind within the art world is, with the Holocaust, when a lot of the artwork was returned. And a lot of the artists from that era got their artwork back or got any different kinds of reparative justice. Here in the U.S., how will that play out? How does reparative justice and art in the U.S. play out? Thank you.
That's a big question.
It's a tough question.
First of all, we have to get the culture to respect art in the first place. I mean, it seems to me that this disconnect with art and expressive things comes from the puritanical what do you call, foundation of this country, which frowns upon anything that's expressive outside of what, you're supposed to go to work, you're supposed to raise your family, but there's really not supposed to be any real enjoyment of anything. It's frivolous stuff, right? So I think it's every question that everybody is asking is difficult because we live in a culture that's anti-art. It really is. I mean, I don't care how many programs you have, everybody who has a museum or an art center knows that and feels that they're swimming upstream, trying to get funding, trying to do programming, trying to get anything that they're trying to do. We don't live in a culture that makes it easy for anything like that to happen. So when you say restorative, to me, that's almost like, you have to be able to have the mindset of people who want to look at what they've done that is so wrong and start to heal and restore. And until that happens, if we can't even acknowledge slavery, and we have people saying, well, we don't even want to talk about that. We don't want to teach that in school. You can't have restorative anything. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. You can't get there you can't do it. I mean, I would love to answer that question. But from where I'm sitting and what I see, I don't know how you make that happen when, like I said, we can't even be truthful about what this behemoth is. I don't even see it as a country, but I'll get off on a tangent on that later.
Hi, Renee. My name is Sandy Choi. I'm a freelance musician. I'm also an arts administrator for the DC Youth Orchestra program here in DC. And one of the big questions we asked ourselves in the orchestral industry is how we can engage differently with more people to show ourselves to be relevant to society right now and the culture. And, so a lot of that work is around democratizing the spaces where we normally perform that are normally exclusionary and very, elitist spaces. So getting out into our communities, engaging with people in a way that's going to be meaningful to them, or engaging differently. And sometimes that's working with visual artists or with other performers, dancers. And so I was wondering if you talk a little bit about, for visual artists, what possibilities you see, talking about how important it is to engage young people because they're not getting it in schools, they're not getting it at home. What we can do to reach more people in a way that is impactful to them, and then other ways that maybe visual artists can work with artists in other disciplines as well.
Some of the most successful things that I feel that I participated in is when like schools and universities decide to invite an artist, but they're not just talking to an art class, they'll go talk to a history class. When you kind of cross-pollinate and mix things up, you're reaching people who normally wouldn't step outside of their lane. If you bring the artist to them, then sometimes it's like, well, wow, I didn't think about it that way. And so the times that I've gone to places when I'm talking to history students or, science people, and they're like, it's really exciting and engaging because I'm listening to them, they're listening to me, and they're opening my eyes and I'm opening theirs. And I think it's always about blurring the lines. We always have to categorize things in this country because it's like people don't understand something unless it's fitting neatly into the category, And so you sound like you're already trying to do some of that.
We had a whole conversation about this earlier.
Yeah. I think more of that. It's like, what they say, the cliche is, color outside the lines or, step outside the box. I think that because we live in a culture that needs to categorize, even when we don't want to do it, we find ourselves slipping into it. Mm-hmm. And I think that to resist that and keep always doing it, helps to, because I think that kids are open, they want to be presented with information. It's the adults that are in the way, so.
I have to say, as an artist, your work has always been a really important source of inspiration. I've always felt it in my gut before I felt it anywhere else. and uh, your work. There's music that I love. There's performance that I love, and I wanted to know if you could share some of the things that you're actually looking at now, listening to now, viewing now that are really hitting that.
Everything. I mean, I can't get any work done sometime in my house because I am moving from room to room, piddling with everything. I'm listening to music, I'm reading a book, and I flip from thing to thing. Like right now I'm learning Spanish on Duolingo, right? Loving that, right? At this age, I'm learning a language, I had a little bit of French in high school, but if you don't speak it when you get out, you lose it, right? But my sister and my niece got me into Duolingo. And just in thinking about learning something from another culture and being able to make small talk with people in the community who are Latino that I would have never been able to speak with, so that's opening up something for me and making me feel more connected,
Good for you.
But, I love music, but what I find that I'm drawn to right now is the music that would have been things that people were listening to the last time we were in such turmoil. So of course I love people like Jimi Hendrix, and Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, and and the things that were really when musicians weren't afraid. You talk about, when I say I want to document the times I'm in, Marvin Gaye, right? When I listen to these people, I'm like, oh my God, I'm back there again because they really put it down in the music, And so that's what I'm kind of drawn to right now, But then I'm a skater, so I do like, popular stuff, and I bounce to that on skating rink floor. But the things that really feed me are the things that are meaningful because I need that right now to make sense of the world because nothing is making any sense, And it's like, I wake up some days and I always have my moments of clarity in the morning. Here are my moments of clarity. When my eyes open up and I'm coming down to get my coffee, my mind is racing and I'm thinking about all these things and connecting the dots. Then at the end of the day, I go out on the deck, and I don't go up on the deck because people can see me. So I sit on the steps going up to the deck, and I'll have a glass of wine. I might even smoke a cigar, and then I get these moments of clarity. That's where I do all my planning and plotting and making sense and, trying to figure out things.
Fomenting.
Is that fomenting? Okay. But I can't even answer the question because I'm so inspired by everything. I love beauty. I crave beauty. Everything inspires me. I can look at an interiors magazine and see a pillow sitting on a sofa and the way the two colors go together. Oh, I can do a painting based on that. It's like sometimes I can't shut my brain off. I can't sleep. It's like I go to sleep and I wake up several times at night, because my brain won't stop. So I get tired sometime during the day, but I can't take a nap. So, it's just everything.
Hey, Renee, how you doing? So good to see you and hear you. And that last question kind of segued into something that I've been thinking throughout the evening is a little bit about your process, your artistic process. You alluded to it some when you said you at the end of the day, you sit on your deck and ruminate and plan and connect your own personal dots. But talk about a little bit about the role of synchronicity and serendipity in your life and in your work and in your art, and how you incorporate that into your work and what moves it. Where do you how do you undo your blocks if you ever have any? It doesn't sound like you have any. But how do you undo your blocks? And what would you say you're working on as an artist? Where you see yourself wanting to grow and stretch a little bit as an artist?
I don't have any blocks. I have piles of sketchbooks with ideas that I won't ever be able to get to in my lifetime because I have so many. And the thing is, the serendipity and the synchronicity, I'm not a religious person. I do not like organized religion at all. Because to me, there's a difference between being religious and spiritual. Very. And the universe is always speaking to me. Whatever you want to define that as, some people say, well, God is speaking to me. I don't know who's speaking to me. I think my ancestors, I think everybody, is speaking to me. And nature is speaking. Everything is speaking to me. And I'm listening. And because I'm listening, this is why I'm a spiritual person, because everything that I seem to need when I'm creating shows up. So to me, it's like, well, somebody is telling me, I haven't defined who that is because I don't know who it is. Somebody's telling me I'm on the right path. They want me to do what I'm doing, whoever it is, because I've made it through pandemics, with no money, you know what I mean? Getting what I need, and it's been like this since I became a self-employed artist in 1990. And I feel like when you believe in what you're doing and you start to open up to the universe and pay attention, you're just guided and you just follow it. So the serendipity and all that and the synchronicity, that's daily in my life, daily. It's like I don't ever feel alone because there's something that's playing with me. We're playing along, having a good old time, I laugh out loud sometimes, because it's something that happened, and I know it's an inside joke between me and the universe, right?
Good for you. Good for you.
So, yeah.
Well, listen, this has been fascinating. I mean, the very nature of Hillyer Art Space at International Arts and Artists is one in which the predicate is the presentation in these three galleries as a foundation for the conversation, for the engagement, the pursuit of understanding.
Yes.
So we're really honored that you would be spotlighted.
I love this place.
Yeah.
It's because of these things like this, and I appreciate, I'm the homebody. I don't want to come out of my house for anything. So when I was asked to do this, of course I would do this for Hillyer. Of course I would do it for Juanita. Of course, because you all are doing the things that I respect for the community.
That's very kind.
So I want to do what I can. And I want to say that because I appreciate that you all could have been at home, but you came here, and I appreciate that.
Very nice. Yeah.